let's think about something for a second. What if the only way to free your country was to team up with its worst enemies? It sounds crazy, right? Well, this is the story of a leader who did exactly that. It's a story packed with daring escapes, secret alliances, and a war for India's freedom that many people have forgotten. We're talking about Subhas Chandra Bose. Okay, so picture this. It's February 1943. The whole world is engulfed in World War II. In the dead of night, a German U-boat quietly slips out of port. Its mission? Honestly, it's pretty much a suicide run. It has to travel thousands of miles through the Atlantic, an ocean just crawling with enemy ships. The stakes? They just couldn't be any higher. And this wasn't just some quick trip across the channel. No way. Just try to imagine being stuck in a submarine for 78 straight days. That's 2.5 months. This U-boat was creeping its way down the entire length of the Atlantic, all the way around Africa, all for one secret meeting off the coast of Madagascar. The danger they were in every single second, it's just unbelievable. So you'd think they were carrying some super weapon or a game-changing secret code, right? Nope. The most precious cargo on that sub was a single person, one passenger, an Indian man traveling with a fake name, Mr. Matsuda. This whole incredibly risky mission was all about getting this one man safely from point A to point B. So you've got to be asking, who was this guy? I mean, who could possibly be that important that two of the world's major powers, Germany and Japan, would risk two of their submarines and all their crew just to hand him off like a baton in the middle of a stormy sea during a world war? Well, his name was Subhas Chandra Bose, but to his followers, he was Netaji, which means respected leader. See, he wasn't just some passenger. He was the mastermind orchestrating a full-blown war for India's freedom, all from outside its borders. And believe me, this insane submarine journey, it's just one small part of his unbelievable story. Okay, so that brings up a big question. How in the world did he get from India onto a German submarine in the first place? To get that answer, we need to rewind the clock a bit, go back 2 years to what is seriously one of the greatest escapes you'll ever hear about. All right, so rewind to January 1941. Bose is basically a prisoner in his own house in Calcutta. He'd been jailed for leading a protest, and to get out, he starts a hunger strike. This really put the British in a tough spot. They were terrified he'd die and become a martyr. So they let him out of jail, but put him under house arrest. And that turned out to be the exact opening he needed. And his escape plan was just genius. Seriously meticulous. Step 1, he disguises himself as an insurance agent to sneak out of Calcutta in a car with his nephew. Then he hops on a series of trains to get to the frontier. But here's the best part, his second disguise. He pretends to be a deaf and mute Pathan. Why? It was a brilliant way to hide the fact that he couldn't speak the local languages. Every single step of this was a huge risk as he made his way to Afghanistan. But the real key to making this all work was buying time, and his family was in on it. For almost 2 weeks after he was gone, they kept up this amazing act. They'd bring food to his empty room every day, and his nephews would secretly eat it so the guards outside thought everything was normal. By the time the British finally figured it out, Bose was miles and miles away. Okay, so he pulled off this incredible escape. But getting out of India? That was just step 1. Now that he was in Europe, Bose started the next phase of his master plan, to build an army from scratch. And how was he going to do that? By making a deal with the devil, so to speak. He was going to ally himself with Britain's biggest enemies, the Axis powers. When he got to Berlin, he wasn't just winging it. He had a very clear 3-point strategy. First, he needed the Germans to officially recognize an Indian government in exile. Second, he needed access to their radio towers so he could broadcast his message of revolution back to India. And third, and this was the big one, he wanted to raise an army by recruiting from the tens of thousands of Indian prisoners of war that Germany had captured. But the reception he got in Germany, well, it was kind of lukewarm. Hitler saw Bose as a useful pawn for propaganda, but he couldn't care less about actual Indian independence. In fact, if you read Mein Kampf, Hitler openly admired British colonial rule and had pretty racist views about Indians. Japan, on the other hand, a totally different ballgame. Prime Minister Tojo there offered Bose full, unconditional support. No strings attached. So even with all the political roadblocks in Germany, Bose didn't just sit around. He started building the framework for a free India right there in Berlin. From his headquarters, the Azad Hind Center, he established so many of the national symbols we know today. The greeting Jai Hind, that was him. The title Netaji, him again. He even chose Jana Gana Mana to be the national anthem. And he did have some success with his army. He managed to form the Indian Legion with about 5,000 Indian POWs. But, and this is a big but, there was a major catch. The Nazis refused to see it as an independent Indian army. To them, it was just another foreign unit fighting for Germany. It wasn't the liberating army Bose dreamed of. This was a huge turning point for him. He realized Hitler was never going to give him what he wanted. So Bose makes a huge strategic shift. He figures his best shot isn't in Europe, but in Southeast Asia, with Japan's full-throated support. And that decision, right there, is what leads to him getting on that German U-boat we started this whole story with. So after that absolutely harrowing submarine journey, Bose finally makes it to Asia. And now he's ready to launch the final, most ambitious part of his entire plan. A full-scale military campaign to literally march into India and kick the British out for good. He gets to Singapore and takes command of the Indian National Army, or the INA, which was mostly made up of Indian soldiers the Japanese had captured. And imagine this moment. He's standing in front of thousands of these soldiers, and he gives them this powerful, electrifying call to action, Chalo Dilli, which means let's march to Delhi. And the way he built this army, it really showed his vision for a free India. It was a completely secular force. You had soldiers from every religion, every caste, all fighting together under one motto: unity, faith, sacrifice. And get this, in a really powerful move, he even named some of the regiments after leaders like Gandhi and Nehru. These were guys he had major political disagreements with, but he still respected them as fellow patriots. So, in March of 1944, the march to Delhi finally begins. The INA and the Japanese armies start pushing into India from Burma, and at first they're actually succeeding. They have this incredible, symbolic victory where they raise the Indian flag on Indian soil for the first time. But that victory, it didn't last. The monsoon season started way earlier than expected. The rains turned the battlefield into a sea of mud. Their supply lines were completely cut off, and they were forced into this brutal, devastating retreat. But even as his army was falling back, Bose never lost sight of the bigger picture. In a radio broadcast from Burma, he actually addressed Mahatma Gandhi directly. And here's an amazing piece of trivia for you. In that very speech, Bose is the one who first calls Gandhi the father of the nation. It's a title that, of course, has stuck ever since. It just goes to show you, despite their huge differences in strategy, nonviolence versus armed revolution, the respect between them ran deep. And it went both ways. Gandhi also recognized Bose's incredible patriotism, once calling him the prince among patriots. They were really like two sides of the same coin, both fighting for the same goal, just taking very different roads to get there. So, in the end, his military campaign didn't succeed. But the story of Subhas Chandra Bose leaves us with a really tough, lingering question. He chose the path of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, aligning with fascist powers to fight colonial rule. His legacy is complicated, and it's a powerful reminder that the fight for freedom is never black and white. It really makes you think, can a noble goal justify an alliance with monsters? That's a question that history is still debating today.